need to know the truth.
Hey everybody, sorry about how the camera looks. I don't know why it looks like that, but we're just going to get into the show. Let me just make sure our Instagram folks can watch as well. So we'll see. We'll try to make it work. All right. Hey everybody, thank you for being with us tonight. This is the Disruptor Chaos. We're on Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays at 7 p.m. And you can find us streaming live. And afterwards, if you don't catch us on streaming live, you can go to my YouTube channel at Rosa Clemente and find all the videos from all of our last episodes. So I want to get right into our guest, Carmen Perez, but just some quick observations from yesterday's news. Of course, AOC, Alejandra Ocasio-Cortez, smashed it, even though at the last week there was a lot of Republican money coming into the race to try to unseat her in the primary. She got 74% of the electoral votes, so she is still a congresswoman. And we finally got rid of Eliot Engel. Most people wouldn't know him. I know people in the Bronx who lived in his district that don't know who he is because he's been in there so long. In the last 15 years, he actually hasn't even lived in the state of New York. He also got a lot of dark money at the last minute for his race, but we got this brother Jamal Bozeman, I think is his last name. He's a former teacher, a principal in the South Bronx, and he took out Eliot Engel. And I actually like seeing all these moderate and right-leaning kind of Democrats who take our communities for granted completely, especially Eliot Engel. They're out. And everybody who runs in an election should always be expected to be primaried. I think with that, we also have to realize that in a district that's so big, the part of the Bronx where now we have a new congressman, out of 100,000 eligible voters, less than 35,000 came out to vote yesterday. So that could speak a lot to lack of enthusiasm and things like that. But either way, he's out. AOC's still there. So I know we got some people who try to hold it down for us in those spaces. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about what's been going on the last day. We brought it up here yesterday. Did I bring it up? Maybe at the end? I'm not sure. But there's been a lot happening with a recent episode of Drink Champs. I don't watch the show. I find it completely sexist, misogynistic. And I'm just like, why are grown men like Noriega acting like that? Although I was talking to a friend who tried to, say like, just because someone's older, they're not written off. And I agree with that. But if you're older and you keep making the same mistakes, then like how many chances do you get? So with that also came this video of Charlemagne the God saying some of the most he has said a lot of bad things. But this video from him talking about R. Kelly years ago, somebody found it and put it out there. And it's probably one of the worst pieces of video I have seen coming out of Charlemagne the God, if not the most, and what he's saying in that. So we got Drink Champs and then this new video of Charlemagne the God, who continues to be so problematic in so many circles, and so many, especially queer folks and LGBTQ people. I think he's learned to kind of curve it, but when things come out that you said years ago, unfortunately, that's the world we're living in. Today, there were a lot of sisters who came out and are saying that OK Player and OK Africa, the women who run it, 2 white women, and the brother who's the ED, they're detailing years and years of harassment, of sexual harassment, of racial harassment around colorism, of not being paid, of being threatened, and all of that. And why I brought up what happened with Noriega, and that it was a long interview. It was almost 3 hours. He had on Mark Lamont Hill and Talib Kweli, my son, a lot of you A lot of you have heard of my son and seen him recently. He's also part of Until Freedom and in the circles of organizers and stuff. And he brought on Russell Simmons at the end of the interview, and from what I talked to some of the brothers that were on, they said that they didn't know that he was going to bring on Russell Simmons. And my reply was, once you saw him come on, you should have got up. Or, well, you can't get up and leave the interview, but you should have cut the feed, and there's some disagreement on that, but my thing is that I believe every woman who has accused Russell Simmons, everybody should watch the documentary On the Record on HBO Max, but check out our interview we did with Drew Dixon, who was kind of the center of the documentary about 3 weeks ago. And I just talked to a sister who has also accused Russell Simmons, and she has agreed to come on our show, and we'll try to have her on by next week. And what I want to say with that is I think there are many ways to always repair harm that is caused, especially by Black and brown men to Black and brown women and non-gender conforming people. I also understand that none of us have power in that way and what it means. But when you sexually assault a woman, you're using your power that you have. It could be the power of someone being scared. It could be a violent rape and all of that. And I think it's, unconscionable that there are still people in my generation of hip hop folks that keep giving this dude excuses. There's a reason he left this country and went to a country with no extradition. So how harmful could it be for people who watch that show, women who watch that show, than to see, Russell Simmons? Or how much pain is this continuing to affect the people that he assaulted, who will never be known just as who they are? Like it will always be Drew Dixon and Russell Simmons, On the Record and Russell Simmons, Seal Lott and Russell Simmons, Jenny Lamette and Russell Simmons, and I think it was pretty unconscionable that Tidal also put the video out. They've taken it down, and I hope that Noriega is getting some talking points or listening to some people, not just brothers, but people. And all of them need to figure out a way how to repair the damage done by that 3-hour interview. And lastly, and I'm going to talk about this pretty quickly with our guests. There's this young brother that was killed in Compton. No, he was killed by a Compton deputy. I forget the city he was at, but his name is Andres Guardado, and he was working security. And nobody's really finding out the information on this. But what they did do yesterday was the LA County Sheriff's Department put a hold, what they call a security hold on his autopsy. And there's only one reason that they put a security hold. They know this autopsy is going to show that they straight up murdered this young brother, the LA County Sheriffs, and they are afraid of the repercussions and the protests that are going to happen once that autopsy is released. It was Gardena, California, by Compton Sheriffs, and on Sunday, 3,000 people marched for him. And that's why they're putting this hold on. But he is the third Latino brother that's also been killed in the past. And I had in the past couple of months while we've all been dealing with the atrocious other murders at the hands of the police, And as I mentioned yesterday, they have found these 5 men lynched, 4 Black and 1 Latino. And I say lynched because there's no way there are 5 men in a 2-week period that in different parts of the country are committing suicide by hanging themselves. So there's a security hold on it, and they're going to have to end up releasing it. But I also think it's going to be an incredible moment for Black and brown people to keep moving the way they're moving, especially on the West Coast, and really being there for each other in this moment, because this family is definitely going to need a lot of support. You can go and watch one of the news reports on KTLA when the family shows up and just realizes what has happened to their son, their nephew, or their grandson. Yeah, so those are just some things, right? And let's bring on our guests. Let's bring on Carmen Perez. Hey.
Hi. Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you? You look amazing as always.
Thank you. You know, I really try to like put that makeup on because we're not getting any sleep. And you know that, Rosa, with what's happening right now. We've been doing this work for a long time. And so I'm like, let me actually put my eyebrows on and some eyeliner so that I can look presentable, because I have dark circles. You know, it's so hard. You're trying to keep up with all the news. You know, you just talked about the Latino young man that, you know, was found hanging in Texas. You were talking about the 3 killings of the Latino young men here in California. One was Eric Salgado out of, I think it was Oakland, 23-year-old by CHP, California Highway Patrol. The other one was Sean Monterosa, who was 22, who was actually at a protest, killed by Vallejo PD. And then the most recent one was Andres, 18-year-old security by Gardena police. And so it's just been nonstop on top of what's happening with Breonna Taylor. You know, there's a big rally that's happening in Kentucky tomorrow. Ahmaud Arbery, they just indicted the 3 men. Are you getting background noise?
You just came back from Kentucky, right? So I wanted to.
No. I was saying that tomorrow
we are.
Rally in Kentucky until freedom and Black Lives Matter. Louisville is putting on. I know we have one of our team members out there supporting, but there's just a lot going on. And so, yeah, thank you. Yeah.
I'm glad you could be on. So let me just let everybody know a couple things about Carmen. She's the president and chief executive officer for the Gathering for Justice. She's one of the co-founders of the Women's March. She worked for Barrios Unidos in Santa Cruz, which is really one of the most well-known community justice programs, doing a lot of work with formerly people who aren't incarcerated, but also a lot of work around business, self-determination, around, our communities and things like that. She marched 250 miles with her sisters, Linda Sassor and Tamika Mallory. And, I could just go on and on about everything. But for me, I have seen and been witness to the really good highlights of, what happens in movement, and how, we're in those moments of euphoria and you're like, shit, I helped create this. There's millions of people on the streets because of a vision that I had. The flip side of that is the more visible you are and the more work you do is when things start coming at you. And I do want to talk about a little bit about that. But before we get into that, can you tell people how you and Linda and Tamika had met and hooked up? I knew you all knew each other, but how did you come together in that way?
So I run the Gathering for Justice. I'm the CEO of an organization that Harry Belafonte founded. And in 2013, as we were beginning to identify resources that could support our organization, what I realized is the fact that people are not really, foundations took forever to fund. And our biggest asset is really human capital. And a lot of us had been in the shadows of the Reverend Al Sharptons or the Harry Belafontes, but we also had made strides in our own way to really build the beloved community that Dr. King talked about. And so I remember I wanted to build a group of people and build collective power. And so I hit up Angelo Pinto, and Angelo was like, hey, people have been trying to do what you're doing. Good luck, right? Marvin Bean had been on an IG thread where he basically, somebody said, hey, you should talk to Carmen. She's been working in juvenile justice reform for quite some time. And he kind of was like, well, I've experienced it. And so I went on that thread and I was like, yo, I would love to build with you. And so as I had told him, hey, I'm really trying to bring a collective of us who've been doing this work to build collective power, he's like, I'm with it, right? And so he brought in Linda to the conversation. I remember meeting Linda. She's, spicy. She's hella fierce. She's fiery. And and we created what's now called Justice League NYC. And then months later, I met Tamika at, I had heard about Tamika. I had, when I moved to the East Coast in 2011, I was really trying to get my feet wet with the organizing here. And so I had heard of Tamika, but in the West Coast, I really didn't know who she was. I was in the violence prevention world. But I had heard her speak, and then I met her in a Chicago conference at Amnesty International. We talked about how we could work with one another. And then that's how I also met my son. And we started building. Tamika is somebody who has the big ideas. While you're actually marching in one march, she's telling us we need to march all the way to Washington, D.C. And you're like, yo, we're not even done with this march. And, Linda's really about, strategy and relationships, and also, making sure that we get the resources we need in order to accomplish what we need to accomplish. So their original Justice League members, Tamika, Linda, my son, and Angelo, have now founded Until Freedom, which we call our sister organization. And so they're currently in Kentucky right now planning this rally that's going to happen tomorrow for Breonna Taylor.
Yeah. So, Trump wins. And then a couple days after that, there's a post on Facebook that talks about bringing women together during the inauguration weekend. And you all saw that and you're like, yeah, but, women of color need to be the forefront of this. So how did that conversation happen where you then all quickly became, known as the people who were organizing this? But when the march actually happened, that inauguration day, honestly, I don't think anybody could expect those type of numbers. And there's a big reason why, of course, Trump, but there were other things as well that could have led, particularly for women of color, Black and brown women, non-gender conforming people, to just find a new way of doing things, or a way to bring folks together at that moment when there were just a lot of people that were devastated. And also the fact that, it's white women who overwhelmingly voted for Trump that got him into office. How did that go down? And y'all were like, all right, we're going to take this on.
Man, Rosa, I'll be honest with you. We did not need another job title. We did not need another project. I remember coming home from Oxnard. I had just done a 3-day juvenile justice conference called Growing Up Lockdown in my own hometown. And it was painful going back home. That was after 20 years of leaving after my sister had been killed. And so I went home to learn, that I've lost so many family members to either the prison industrial complex or even to violence, gang violence. And also friends, a lot of friends that I grew up with, some were addicted. So I came home back to New York thinking I was going to rest, thinking I was going to do some, it was in October that we had Growing Up Lockdown. So I was like, okay, I'm going to take November to really do some strategic planning with our team at the gathering in Justice League. And then December, we're just going to coast into the new year. Well, when the election was happening, we got invited by Roland Martin to Washington, D.C. to just kind of talk about, what our thoughts were. Right. So I felt we had it in the bag. I really did. I thought, I was initially a Bernie supporter. And then, when Hillary won the Democratic
primary.
Yeah, primary, I was like, all right, I'm going to go out and I'm going to vote for her. But I'll be honest with you, on the way home from Washington, D.C., we really didn't know what was happening because there wasn't really steady internet. And so we were getting different results from people. And it was myself, Tamika, and my son. And at some point, I remember feeling this strong cloud come over me, just feeling, I had lost my sister at the age of 17. She was buried on my birthday. And I felt that same cloud when we got the results that Trump had won. And so I wasn't even interested in anything that was being posted on social media because I was so angry at the fact that he actually ran his campaign and had called Mexicans rapists, and, you know, and was very blatantly racist. He was blatantly misogynistic, right? And yet people went out to vote for him. And so I felt like, I felt very defeated. I felt as though nobody showed up for my community, right? There's a lot of posts that went around and people were saying, well, you know, at least he ain't attacking our community. Now it's kind of like, he actually kind of is, like, indirectly, right? If he's attacking us, he's attacking you. But that was one of the longest train rides I had ever experienced. And so I remember being mad. I was mad at white people. We had a conversation within our team, the Gathering for Justice, about like how we as people of color were feeling. And, you know, the fact that he also talked about deporting our parents that were not born here, but we were, it was just a lot. It was a lot. And I will say, I felt defeated. I remember my mom calling me and telling me, you need to pick up your head. You can't carry the world on your shoulders. And I said, well, you don't understand, Mom. Like, this is actually what we try to fight against. And so about 2 days later, maybe 48 hours, we get a call. I remember being in my room, and on the other line was Michael Skolnick, Tamika, and 2 other women. And basically, these women had reached out to Michael Skolnick and had said, hey, do you know anybody who knows how to plan marches? And he said, I actually do. You know, Carmen, Perez, and Tamika Mallory know how to plan marches in their sleep. And it was because they had already posted on social media, on Facebook, that they were the Million Women March, right? Which was an erasure of the Black women who had marched in Philadelphia 20 years prior. And so they wanted us to come in and meet with them. And so we did. And we brought this it was funny. We brought this binder of like the planning to show them we knew how to organize, but we had just co-organized Justice or Else the year prior. And also the year prior, we had just marched that 250 miles. You know, we still hadn't recovered. Our feet hadn't recovered from the 250 miles. But we did. We went in there, we met with the women, and we knew that we could organize this and direct them in a way where it wasn't about Trump, right? Our organization, The Gathering, being grounded in Kingian nonviolence, it's about attacking forces of evil, not people doing evil. You get rid of Trump, you still have the same symptoms in America, right? He was just one of the problems. And so we began to organize. Meanwhile, we were still running the Gathering and Justice League NYC, trying to raise the age in New York State of criminal responsibility. And I will say, I'm glad that all those years of organizing, I felt prepared us for that moment to direct people, to create entry points for people to get involved. But it was difficult. It was difficult because we were organizing with people who had no racial analysis, no racial justice analysis, had no intersectional Chicana Black feminist analysis either. I remember talking about intersectional feminism and people didn't even understand what that meant. I also remember jumping on the couches saying we had to center Indigenous and trans folks, and people were like, why? And so my role in the whole organizing was to incubate the Women's March under the Gathering for Justice, grounded in Kingian nonviolence, make sure that we had a diverse group of people. We were on calls. I had a team, Paula Mendoza, and Tony Choi. We had a team of folks that were working on partnerships from like 7 in the morning till 11 p.m. at night until they could kick us out of the building, essentially, is when we would leave work. And so there were moments when we also found ourselves like taking breaks and maybe having like a shot so that we could like continue, right? But it was hard, like, having conversations. One, when you're talking about, Tamika had arranged a call with Bernice King, the daughter of Dr. King, to get the blessing from Bernice to call it the Women's March on Washington. Because, as we know, the original March on Washington was led by SNCC and Dr. King and several folks from that movement. And also bringing on people like Gloria Steinem and Harry Belafonte and Dolores Huerta and Diane Nash to be some of the national co-chairs to, again, connect us to the work that happened in the past. But that was a lot. I will say, Rosa, like, it was a lot of emotional baggage for the women of color And also the fact that as we were organizing and having difficult conversations that we're facing forward through social media, we were also having them internally, and a lot of white privilege showed up, a lot. And 2020 in retrospect, I lost a lot of my time with my family. That was actually one of the last, that was one of the last Christmases that I could have spent with my father. But I chose to help organize the Women's March. And so there's a lot of sacrifice that was made. But obviously, January 21st, 2017 produced 5 million people. And about 70 people who showed up on the streets hadn't protested ever, or hadn't protested or showed up to a march in 20 years. And so I'm proud of what we were able to do. But to your point of, when you do certain things, your visibility raises to a different level. It doesn't mean you have the resources to actually protect you from that type of hate or type of attacks that come with that type of visibility too.
Yeah, so when you all woke up that morning, and I'm sure you were, getting numbers because of the amount of buses, but you wake up that morning and you get to the stage, and then you look out. Like, what did you feel when you just were on that stage and just saw that sea of people?
Woo, girl, you about to make me emotional.
Well, that's I'm crying. No. I mean, I have to say, I was here at home. In fact, when Trump won, I was on a plane to Colorado because I had a friend. His name is Paul Buckley, and he was teaching in Colorado Springs. And he had called me a couple months before, and he's like, "Well, we want to bring you in after the election, but since Hillary's going to win," I'm like, "Dude, she's not winning. Trump's going to win." Like, I had this issue with people for so long, and only because of my experience here in Albany, New York. So Trump is running. I'm 2 hours outside in New York City. This is all Trump territory. After, and people are like, "You're insane. That's not going to happen." I'm like, you never know. But when I got off the flight, the results were coming in. And when he picked me up, he was like, "Yo, what are you going to talk about tomorrow?" And I was like, "I don't know." And then the next night, I didn't know what I was going to talk about. But really what happened was the amount of emotional, like, all those young people were crying. Some were hysterical. I mean, people were just, I guess in a what would be a word? They were just stuck in that, like, how the fuck did this happen kind of thing. Right. So then I watched from home here with Alicia, the march, and I was like, yo, the one time I don't go to a march in DC. I was like, I could have been on that stage just to look and to see all those people. But you look out, and then we're going to show a video of you speaking. You look out, what's that? Are you like, oh my God? Are you like, what's happening? Or kind of suspended emotion because you had also were not sleeping for days. So
yeah, it was, we got there. I don't know what time in the morning we got there, right? Everything just kind of seems to be blurry at a certain time, but we got there, and I remember feeling like, holy shit, we still have like 4 or 5 hours left to begin. And we cannot see anything but pink hats. First of all, you're kind of like, who brought all those pink hats? But then we learned that it was grandmas who could, who were in hospitals sewing, trying to contribute to the movement. But it was a moment where you did not know that you were living in a part of history that was gonna inspire young girls all over the world. And that for me was it, right? The fact that I, myself, Tamika, Linda, and 70 national organizers, the 400 state coordinators, all were able to produce this march. I felt like we did it for that little girl who's gonna look one day and say, I saw Sophie Cruz on stage. And if she could do it, I could do it. Or I saw Carmen Perez or Tamika Mallory or Linda. we did it for for our younger generation, because I don't know about you, Rosa, I didn't see many people looking like me in leadership roles. Like, even to this day, I'm kind of like, but we're all here, we're all interconnected, right? But it was a moment of truth. It was a moment that everything you sacrificed was not in vain, and that all those years that you probably slept on, like I slept on benches when I was organizing in Columbus, like I slept on floors in Little Rock, Arkansas. I remember organizing, you didn't make money, like, and you also like spent your own credit card when we would go to Flint, but you knew you had to do it, right? Like your heart just taught you that you had to show up regardless if you got paid or not, or regardless if you had resources. And so for me, it was that moment of like, wow, God, like you really prepared me for this. And again, it was emotional, and I'm sure, folks have their interpretation of it. And I always welcome those difficult conversations, because we were trying to do something that had never been done in application. It was always in theory, like to have a truly intersectional feminist run a show, and it wasn't, and we messed up. And but also too, just the amount of labor that we put in love and sacrifice, I think for me was like, this is what I did it for, and I did it for them.
Yeah. So let's show the video, a clip of you speaking that day.
Buenos dias, familia. Good afternoon, family. My name is Carmen Perez Jordan, and I'm extremely proud as one of the original co-chairs of the Women's March to welcome the Women's Wave. 2 years ago, as I stood on this stage and made promises to women and fans and allies around the world to help build an intersectional movement that was bound in the liberation of all people. I shared on that day how Dr. King spoke of the power of being maladjusted to an unjust society. I vowed that we would not adjust to hatred and bigotry. We would resist Islamophobia, xenophobia, white supremacy, sexism, racism, misogyny, and ableism. We would be brave and intentional and apologetic in addressing the intersections of our identities. And collectively, we would stand amongst the most marginalized because they are us. Those weren't just words to me. I have worked in the prisons for 20 years, and I believe in the inherent power and beauty of restorative justice. The idea that human beings are imperfect, we fail, we make mistakes, but we do not throw away people. Over the last year, my Sisters in Women's March and I have faced accusations that have hurt my soul. Charges of anti-Semitism and neglecting our LGBTQIA family. And I want to be unequivocal in affirming that Women's March, and I and my sisters condemn anti-Semitism and homophobia and transphobia in all forms. There is no excuse of bigotry. There is no defense of bigotry. There is no excuse for hate. But if this movement is to grow and prosper, there must be, in times of conflict, an opportunity for truth and reconciliation. Are you committed to that? Yes. And I am with you, sisters and brothers and siblings, because I am committed to both as well. I vow to anyone who doubts their place in the Women's March, you are welcome here. I vow to Jewish women, there is a place at the table for you. I vow that we will work together and harder to fight against ableism and all forms of discrimination. I stand here as a Chicana, Mexican-American woman with indigenous roots in all my different identities, proud of the work we've accomplished together in the Women's March. You all showed up. We elected hundreds of women, and together we will win. Now I stand even more committed to dedicating my life to building the beloved community that Dr. King dreamt of. Are you with me? The next step in this evolution of our revolution is the Women's Agenda. Women's Agenda will give clear marching orders to every grassroots activist in this nation and establish a solid platform on which truly progressive candidates could run and win in 2020. This is our blueprint for action in 2019 and beyond. But I want to leave you with this. I love this country just as much as I love anyone. I love the pastel sunsets in California, the rolling hills in Tennessee, the ungodly buildings of New York, and the country roads of West Virginia. But most of all, I love my people. I love the people that are the fabric that make up this great tapestry that is America. It's the 310 million stories that paint this once black canvas and the tens of millions of stories that came before them. It's in the people where we find our shared values, not in our politics, not through our laws. It's in each other where we find our hope. So I want you all to remember that the person who doesn't look like you or vote like you is still part of arguably the greatest experiment in history. And the only way we leave this place better for our children is to respect one another. Treat your neighbor as you would want to be treated. Listen to each other and find a way to work together on making this country what we all dream that it could be. Thank you. Y que viva la mujer.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think what you spoke about in there about disposability at the beginning is something that a lot of us, including me, need to do better at. And post the march, right? Also, you was Justice born at before the march?
Yeah. So he was in the back somewhere. Somebody was holding him. Mm-hmm.
So you met your husband, you had a baby, then you have this march, and then, like I said, the Euphoria's there, and then I think I would say that in October of that year, was it October of that year, the following year, 2017, right? You all held the women's convention in Detroit. The same day was when all this stuff was breaking around Harvey Weinstein. Then Toronto, who has been working on Me Too forever, goes from like one night and then 48 hours later to this explosion, that's happening. And, those are the euphoric moments. But for the last year or two, it has been a difficult journey for you, Linda and Tamika, around the Women's March. And I'm not sure if everybody has clarity. And, I just wonder if you could explain to people, as comfortable as you are, of the decision that you all have made to still sit. I think you have revolving 2-year things that you sit on the board, but I know how horribly difficult it became, and a lot of this white women with their liberal politics and the attacks against Tamika and Linda for being anti-Semitic and all of that. How were you able to move on from that moment? Because I think that would have knocked a lot of people out for the count for a little bit. And y'all didn't miss a step. And I wonder if you all have had the time you need to process that, but you haven't missed a step since then. Can you let people know just, where we are with the Women's March and your participation in it?
So one, I just want to share that segment that you just played is from the 2018 Women's March. And so at that time, we were already accused of anti-Semitism. And so that came in, I believe, March of 2018, where we began. First of all, I didn't know what anti-Semitism was. I grew up in California in a Chicano, Black, poor white Samoan Filipino neighborhood. And so, and at the time I was living in a Hasidic Jewish neighborhood in New York City when we were accused of anti-Semitism. But it was really based on the fact that images had appeared where Tamika was sitting in the audience of A Savior's Day, which she had always sat in, right? Like I shared with you prior to coming onto the Women's March. And one of the reasons we were brought in was because we co-organized Justice or Else. We knew how to organize marches and protests. But then I was tagged into that same tweet by Jake Tapper, who had brought up an image of me and the Minister Farrakhan 3 years prior and said that I was also anti-Semitic. And so one of the things that was very difficult was not understanding, right, the backlash that it would have and how all of a sudden you go from, organizing the largest single day protest in the history of America to now being enemy number one, or enemy number three, because it was, myself, Tamika, and Linda that were accused of this. And what I've learned in history, right, and you're a historian yourself, and so you could tell it better than me, but, Kwame Ture, right, SNCC, all those folks were accused of anti-Semitism. They weaponized anti-Semitism in order to get rid of, people who were being effective in the movement. And so as I learned more, I remember I Googled what anti-Semitism was, and I learned that it was hostile toward Jews. And never in my life had I had an experience where I could be hostile towards Jews, nor ever say things. One of the things that we talk about is daring discussions and courageous conversations. And so when you and I talk about anti-Blackness in the Latino community, it's not you shaming or me shaming. It's about understanding that we have so much to learn, right? There's different experiences that happen. And so I think, particularly Tamika took a major hit, and it was hard for myself or Linda or anybody to be there. It's kind of like when you're all burning in a burning house. How could you treat your friend who's also burning while you have burned scar? You're burning yourself. I learned that because I will say that they did try to tear us apart. As you know, you and I have had conversations about like our friendship and our sisterhood. But it was challenging because we were thrown away. And it's the reason, I work with people in prisons who have called a green light on, on neighborhoods who have murdered, right? I'm not there to judge them. I'm there to provide a service and be of service. And, so we consistently talk about reconciliation, meet people where they're at, champion them to your cause, building the beloved community. And that's not what we were accepted with, right? So as people, and the Women's March was grounded in Kingian nonviolence, the women themselves who were, who threw us away did not apply that in their own life to say, hey, one of the things, a woman came up to me, she was a Latina, she was Jewish and she was Latina, and she came up to me. It's when I had baby Jay in his stroller, and I went to support Jay at a speaking engagement around allyship. So as he says, I want to thank my wife for coming, people recognize me. And so they gravitated towards me afterwards. And one of the women said, like, I really loved what you built, but like, why couldn't you denounce the minister? Like, why? And I said, well, you're sharing with me that you're Latina. So do you denounce your family members that make mistakes? First of all, I don't have control of what somebody says. That's not that I don't have that much power. But also too, if you really cared about making sure that the movement was sustained, then you would have called me in with love, and you would have showed a united front to the world saying that you cannot take down these women. And you would have said to me, hey, Carmen, like, maybe you need to like work on some of this, but you guys didn't. You threw us away. And I'm not about throwing away people. I'm about meeting people where they're at, championing them to our cause, understanding that there also needs to be a form of reconciliation. But I will say, Rosa, like, and I know Tamika did this work too, but for the last 2 years, I've been meeting, I've been mentored by a rabbi, and I've also been meeting, I leaned into the controversy because as a moral leader, I felt it was important to build relationships, to understand the pain and the harm that was caused by the actions of the Women's March. But again, I'm at this moment just now being able to feel comfortable publicly speaking about this, but it brought a lot of harm to me. I was 4 months pregnant when the allegations came out. I was threatened. I was told that they were going to kill my NIGGER baby, that they were going to take him out. People would show up to our office unannounced. So, you know, as you try to do this work and you try not to miss a step, right? Because you still got to show up for your own community who's in pain. There was a lot of pain that we felt. And so, you know, I'm just really proud of my team within Justice League and the Gathering for Justice that have consistently showed up, and sisters and people like yourself that, you know, text me at 11 p.m. knowing damn well it's like 2 in the morning for you, telling me that you love me, because we need to hear that. It's not easy, and it hasn't been easy, but I will say we made changes. We were able to, you know, change the unity principles to include Jewish women, as we also left out queer and left out Latino women. We were also able to bring in Jewish women into the new board of directors, as well as when we were creating the feminist agenda, bring in and make sure there was representation. So although, you know, maybe people did not really hear what they wanted to hear or hear it soon enough, you know, for me, it was also leaning in and having those private conversations that I continue to have to this day, and really making sure that I'm listening, that I'm open. But I hope that people also accept the fact that as, you know, Black people are being killed, as Latino young men are being killed by the hands of police here in California, that, you know, it would be great if y'all showed up for us as well, right?
See, this is what I think is interesting, and how I write every day in my journal. You know, I actually think y'all really leaned in too much into it in this regard. The minute you say someone's anti-Semitic, it's not just something that stays in the ether. It then becomes the ADL and all these Zionist organizations that literally try to ruin lives. You know, what they really wanted to do is for you three never to be seen, heard, or talked, period. Then when I was an undergraduate here at SUNY Albany, my 3rd year, I became president of the Black Alliance, and we were strong. It was the early 90s, so all the Black and Latino folks, we were always mostly united and strong. And Kwame Ture was one of my mentors, because at that time, he had created the All African People's Revolutionary Party. So if you were in college in the 90s, like when we brought Farrakhan, they pulled the alarms, they try to like expel us and all that. Well, anyway, Kwame Ture came to speak, and he wasn't supposed to come on the campus. We literally snuck him in, while the president of the university, who was a Black man, happened to be in Israel and called from there to say he cannot come on the campus. We as an organization said, F this, we're bringing him on the campus. And we did. And the next day I was expelled from SUNY Albany. And so if it wasn't for all the brothers and sisters there and the unity we had, I wouldn't have been able to go back and finish what is the most defining moment for me around how I became involved in organizing the movement. You know, subsequently, 2 years later, I organized for the Million Man March, and I was a woman that went to the Million Man March. Like, I was like, I'm going, you know, I got tape and everything from that. what I was telling Linda last week is that it's actually a lazy thing, because you know what it means when Zionism is racism and we're dealing with settler colonialism, you know what it means when you call someone anti-Semitic. And the idea that we are the ones that always have to be like denouncing Farrakhan, the fuck? I'm like, well, we're in a different time right now. Let's just say it's such in this last month where I'm like, all right, white people are maybe finally listening, or whatever's happening is fascinating to me, and the strength of all these young people out there. But that label is meant to harm you the rest of your life, And I think about, we didn't have no social media back then. What if, I don't know what I would have done.
Oh, it's painful.
It's painful. Let me, because you talked about the threats. My apartment here was broken into twice. Right. I have a good idea of who did it. It was a Zionist organization. They broke into our office also on campus. At one point, the campus security said, listen, the threats are heavy. We want to come and be at your mass meeting. And I said, nah, I'm not going to stand with cops. But that's also because I had like I said, mentors and everything. I think the fact that there were some women that really rallied, white women that rallied around this, and unfortunately some sisters of color, to almost force y'all to be marginalized in something you created, is something that I continue to think about and talk about. But I was worried at one point for all of your physical safety. I was like, yeah, they're going to need some security. Like, yeah. In fact, call the fruit of Islam, which y'all did too. So now, is your relationship, and because I definitely want to get to the gathering, is your relationship with the Women's March as it stands now? Is it a relationship that you're okay with? Is it something that you have said, okay, we did something and maybe it's now time to pass it on to people there, and I'm going to really focus on the gathering and growing what you and also your husband, who's formerly incarcerated, the work that you're doing now in Cali? Has that been, do you feel okay with it, I guess is the question.
I think I'll always feel abandoned by the Women's March in regards to never feeling protected, because really what happened was that there were conversations of, well, we weren't accused of anti-Semitism. That was you, Tamika, and Linda. But, we built something that I never want to take away from history, right? And certainly I know Tamika and Linda will probably never return to the Women's March. And that's a decision that I'm in the middle of making myself, is the fact that, like, is it really what we intended it to be? Is it really holding up the values and the principles that we grounded it in? And I think, there's always room for new leadership. And if other folks want to take it on and take it in the direction in which they see it, that's wonderful. But one of the things that I'm not okay with is the erasure of the 4 national co-chairs, of the 70 national organizers, and the 400 state coordinators. When I talk about the Gathering for Justice, I always talk about our founder, Harry Belafonte, because I am extremely grateful that he has invested in my generation and beyond. I always talk about my mentor, Nane Alejandres from Barrios Unidos, who gave me the opportunity to travel all over the world, to go into prisons. And it's the reason why I don't denounce people. I don't even know if there's a word in Spanish on denounce, but that's right. I don't denounce my family members that commit crimes. That's just not part of our culture. We don't throw people away. And we're so caught up in this call out culture that people don't realize that the more you call people out in the way in which me, Tamika, and Linda were called out, that you're also imposing harm onto us, right? To your point, I recently went onto my public page on Facebook to see a list of threats. And I went on there and I said, actually, if you want to talk about anybody, my mentor is Harry Belafonte. And they're like, oh, he's also this, not considering that he's married to a Jewish woman, right? And so, like, one of the things that I always wanted to clarify is the fact that, like, there are people on our board of directors, there are people on our staff, there are people in our Justice League team, there are people in our community partners that are Jewish folks. Jewish folks are not absent of our work or our lives, right? But it was easy for people one thing that we didn't talk about, and I don't know if you talked to Linda about this, but like when we became the 4 national co-chairs and there was a different level of visibility, there was also a level of jealousy that came with that I did not know how to personally handle, right? I was like, wait, what? People feel you unseen, people, like, no, that's not what we want, because I'm also a very intentional leader when it comes to creating space for everybody to be involved. So, I think, the Women's March is headed in a different direction, but there are certain state leaders that have said some very inappropriate things about us. I'm of the mind, let's call people in with love. If we have internal conflict within ourselves, we don't go on a newspaper and throw people away. And that's certainly what has happened in this time. And I hope that one day we could come face to face and have a conversation with some of these folks that threw us out, threw us away, because it's important for the strength of the movement. As we talk about reconciliation and we talk about creating entry points, I'm gonna tell you something, Rosa. Like, if people, I work with my husband is formerly incarcerated. We work with people every single day. We get a call from somebody in prison, whether it's the women's prison or whether it's a male prison. I'm gonna tell you something. The people that show up to these marches will probably never, ever march for the people that we talk to. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. We probably, although they do the hashtag Black Lives Matter or they believe in intersectional feminism, they ain't never gonna show up for me and you, Rosa. That's just the bottom line.
And I think that's what it had. What I have found about you is you have a very calm and steady presence, and your convictions mean everything to you. And I remember the last time I saw you was for your birthday party, and you had just experienced some shit in DC before you got to the birthday. And, I had to tell you, like, to see what y'all went through, I mean, I was always angry, and I'll still always be angry, which is why I was always checking in on you all, and we'll always do that, and we're comrades and stuff. But, I do think there comes a time when you realize it's not for me anymore.
Right.
You're absolutely right. We both of us, and I want to get into this a little bit and we'll wrap up. We're going to go a little bit over because I do want to talk to you about one more thing. But both of us are, well, as I identify Black Puerto Rican woman, you identify as Chicana, Indigenous, Black, and we're married. And I told you that. I was like, the thing is that even in our circles of, quote, Latina women, what I've always encountered is just hate and jealousy. And I'm like, I'm too old to be like wanting to be up in circles anymore. But I was telling you, I said we have a similar experience in that we're both married to African-American men who were formerly incarcerated, which then means our children are Black, and what that means in every sense of the word. And we've always been more accepted for, within the African-American community or the larger Black left. Right. So it's like there could be 9 million conferences on Chicana women and stuff. You're probably not going to get invited to that. And I'm definitely not getting invited to the Puerto Rican stuff because they're like, you talk about this race stuff too much. And sorry, everybody on Insta. So with that, there's been so many conversations happening now around Afro-Latino identity, Black Latinx identity. And when I was talking to you the other day, I was like, yo, this conversation is getting real stale real quick. First, like all of a sudden, all these white passing Latinas like that I thought were white and obviously apparently they're not, are the ones that are representing our us who identifies Black Latino women or Afro Latino women. There's a marginalization that they're being very purposeful about in many of these kind of Latino news outlets that are like, y'all know that that's just what I wrote and y'all just cut and pasted it and gave it to someone else's. Like, it's crazy. And I was telling you, like, we're going to be working together more closer. What has been your feeling around now kind of this explosion of not only that identity, but this, for me, this fallacy that it now means that every Latino, Latina, Latinx person, especially Afro and Black ones, we're the people that are the most anti-Black. You know, and I was doing an interview and I had to cut it short because I was like, yo, you didn't even do your homework. This is a bullshit interview. I know what the hit piece is going to look like. And I was just like, yo, this idea that now all of a sudden it's Latinx people that have power, which we don't in that systemic way, to now all of a sudden be talked about as being the most anti-Black communities in the United States. And I'm like, have you ever been to any rally? What do you always see? You always see a Mexican flag and you always see a Puerto Rican flag. We always show up. And then we have our comrades that are African-American that always show up for us too.
Right.
What has been your feeling around this now, like, conversation that this is why we got to get something going real soon, because we got to change that narrative right now because it's ridiculous.
Most certainly. You know, Jay was talking to me the other day. He's like, I'm so sick and tired of hearing people say that Latinos are, you know, anti-Black. He's like, because I grew up in Stockton where we grew up together. He's like, I know your experience in Oxnard. You grew up with the Black community, Black teachers. You grew up in a Black and brown community. And so one of the things that I think I try to focus on, Rosa, is exactly your point, right? I certainly cannot talk about the whole diaspora, but I do talk about my Chicano experience, coming from the duality of being a Mexican American first generation and being Chicana. My father, born in the 1920s, and sharing with me how he had grown up within the Chicano and Black community, because what was happening is that there were signs when he was little that said no Blacks, no Mexicans, and no dogs, right? So I grew up in that world. The same thing happened with New Yorkers. And so I was on a call earlier today about, like, you know, one of the things that I really want to highlight is this young Lord Black Panther solidarity and this Brown Beret and Black Panther solidarity, is that there has always been forms of solidarity. If we look at what happened with Dr. King and why he was assassinated, he was talking about economics, but he was also trying to bring all these different movements, like the American Indian movement, the Chicano movement, the United Farm Worker movement, the Black Panther movement. He met with Malcolm, right? He was trying to unite everybody under the Poor People's Campaign, and people were like, the government was like, hell no, he cannot do that. That is building collective power. And so when they see us, for me in California, I think about what happened in the 1970s, the 1980s. We started seeing a rise in prisons that then was separating our people. What they do intentionally is they segregate people based on race. And so you once grew up with a Black or a Latino as brothers, right? You now go into the prison system, you are segregated, you are taught hate, you come out, and now you're like, yeah, I don't mess with that dude. I don't fuck with, them essays or whatever it may be. So we also have to identify that government interruption that has happened in the New Yorican Black community, the Puerto Rican and the Chicano Black community, where we've always been together. I was also talking about the 92 riots that happened here. There was a lot of Black and brown solidarity. The work that we do at Barrios Unidos inside the prisons is working with the African American Culture Committee and the Mexican American community. And we with the indigenous community, we put together Juneteenth, Cinco de Mayo in collaboration with one another. And so I'm not going to allow this narrative, to your point, to destroy the fact that some of us have grown up in solidarity. Yes, we got to deal with the shadeism from our communities, the whitewashing that has happened through our media, the anti-Blackness. Yes, we got to deal with that. But there's also a lot of points, not just of tension, but points of solidarity within the Black and brown community. Yeah,
and it's just a really lazy argument. It's historically so inaccurate. And I just want to correct something that you said. So, when Dr. King was assassinated, then that's the founding of the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. The Young Lords is 68, and the American Indian Movement, the Weather Underground, the White Patriots, what Fred Hampton Sr. called the Rainbow Coalition. And it is after he pulls this Rainbow Coalition talking about yes, we may be different, but the economy and capitalism and militarism is what's killing us, which is what made him so dangerous that he had to be assassinated by the state. And then, of course, if we look on the New York end with hip hop, Puerto Ricans are co-creating the culture at that time. We're all seeing the Bronx burn, or Schaumburg, or we could go on with,
Right.
you know, the La Raza and all those studies around La Raza, Chicanoism, and all of that. So I find it a very convenient and lazy argument, because now if you're down with Afro-Latinoism, right, it's a brand. Still not dealing with the politics. Like that, what has happened to brothers, especially in San Quentin prison, has been going on for 2 decades, where these COs pit people against each other, put them to fight against each other, you know, and that's
called Gladiator. It's called Gladiator,
right?
Yeah.
There was a documentary around that. So yeah, I'm looking forward to, you know, moving on this work together, because it is critically important for our children. Like, we have Afro, Black, Latino children, you know, and you're having another baby, and it's just, we have to be on the forefront of this discussion as mothers as well, and raising up our babies that way. But if there was something you want to leave the audience with, we didn't get to gather, we didn't talk about the gathering. I think everybody really knows, particularly the Gathering for Justice, the work you've been doing for a decade, and that your mentor is Harry Belafonte, that's still with us. And, you know, if you've ever met Mr. Belafonte, it's just love. It's love. And it's like, that might not work. Think about this. We did this. We didn't do it right, but y'all doing it right. And I know how important that is. I also know that you got through like a lot of life changes. Your father passed, and you're March, and then at these events, and then you're getting hit with being anti-Semitic, and you got married, had a baby, now having another one. I think people would probably want to know, how do you handle it? And what is something that you wish now you could have been like, I might have spent a little bit too much and stressed myself out a little bit too much about this, or this space, or whatever?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for the conversation. Really warms my heart, and it also kind of reminds you of what you've been through, right?
Yeah.
The way in which I handle it is, I believe that I do God's work. You know, my mother traveled the world praying for people, and although I don't believe in the institution of religion, I do believe that I have a purpose. And also the fact that, you know, when I was 17, when my sister was buried on my 17th birthday, I did this work for her and my older brothers, who were constantly being harassed by police. But there's a different purpose now, and that's my son, baby Jay, Justice, and my new son that's cooking. He's been in here almost 7 months, baby Dom, and my husband, and understanding that, you know, I owe it to the Black community. There was an investment that was made to me by my coach, Pat Bow, and my coach, T, and my teachers, and all
when
my.
you played basketball, because a lot of people don't know you played basketball in high school.
I was a little baller from the age of 5 all the way to college, and then I also played. I also coached varsity high school girls, but I played basketball, softball, ran track, and my primary sports were basketball and softball. It's really where I thrived, and my coach was my coach. He was my mentor. He was my father figure. He was the man that took me away from the home violence that was happening. And so I feel this responsibility. Again, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for him. And I know a lot of people know about Mr. Belafonte and Nane, but it's really Pat Bow who made a major difference in my life. But in regards to the Gathering for Justice, I welcome people to go to our website, gatheringforjustice.org. That is FORjustice.org, gathering, and also follow us on Twitter and Instagram at gather4justice, as well as at NY Justice League. And, you know, you're going to find a lot of good work there. We have a dynamic team of people who are part of Justice League, as well as the Gathering. We do youth programming. We also work on police accountability. We put together marches, protests. About 2 weeks ago, we put a march together in 4 days that brought about 30,000 people out. And it was called Stolen Lives, Looted Dreams, the Take Back, so that we could take back the narrative as to why we're marching and not put Black folks in harm. And, a lot of our work right now is centering our Black siblings that are part of Justice League, and our team, especially because, at this moment, it's not just about having a hashtag Black Lives Matter, but also making sure that their voices are heard and centered in this time. So yeah, we have a lot of dynamic people. There's, everything's always going on every single day. And, I'm really grateful for the support that folks have given us, especially you, Rosa, who consistently, checks on me, and sending Justice and Alicia so much love. I can't believe Alicia's out there like leading chant. She is her own human being. And you know who her mama and daddy are. So
I tell people we're great parents, but the movement raised her, and you're one of those movement people. What I really, really have admired of you and really watched is that you are centering young people, right? Sometimes we talk about intergenerational, or we're like, then you figure out everybody's 45 and you're like, there's generations missing, The mark of a great organizer is one that brings up younger people. So a couple weeks ago when y'all hit the streets definitively that day, I was like, yo, these are all 25, 23, and that's how it should be, so I think it's pretty incredible what we're seeing here at this moment, and that there's so many great opportunities. First and foremost, I really want to thank you for your time and, our talks and just building together. You know how much we all love you and baby Justice and Jay, and hopefully we'll see each other soon, but I definitely want to bring you back later to talk really specifically about the gathering, because you have been not only part of a lot of campaigns, you approach the campaigns by seeing who created them and then bringing in the resources and other things to uplift that. And I think that's how we should be doing organizing. So I love you, and, stay safe and healthy. Thank you for your time, your honesty, and just for all the work you do. Thank you.
I appreciate you and love you. Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
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 Well, thanks everybody for staying with us. This one went a little over, but it was well worth it. Today, we just want to bring up, we won't be able to show you the video, or I don't know if our producer thinks we should show it, but we want to highlight one of our political prisoners or prisoners of war who are incarcerated for their political beliefs and their actions. And we want to highlight Sundiata Acoli. We want to highlight Sundiata Acoli, which yesterday his name was brought up, but we have a video that we're going to show you, and just watch and you can find out. We'll let you know how you can support Sundiata. We had on a former political prisoner last night, Sekou Odinga, who is out and works to make sure that his rest of his comrades are coming out. So we're going to show this video. Yeah, so unfortunately, it's been 28 years since he should have been paroled. He's 83 now, and obviously, not in the best health conditions. So go to Sundiata Kohli. You can also check out the JerichoMovement.com. You can always give money via JPay. You can send messages via there, but all the PPs always says the letters that keep them going. So, we're going to continue to highlight our political prisoners of war, or how people, probably we should call them freedom fighters, right, that are imprisoned for their political beliefs and the sacrifices that they have made for Black liberation. And, when you're doing this work, you cannot forget people behind the walls. He's 83. No 83-year-old man, a woman, non-gender conforming people should be incarcerated. And this is now the time for us to really lean in and begin to fight even harder to get our freedom fighters out of the incarceration that they are in. There are so many things that are being accomplished right now. The system is realigning and readjusting, but this is our time to really, like I said, let's lean in hard and get our elders out. This is ridiculous that he's been in prison for over 40 years, and they just want him to renounce his beliefs. If you've ever followed the case of Oscar Lopez Clivera, Oscar could have came out when they were initially, him and his comrades were granted clemency from at that time, Bill Clinton, excuse me. And Oscar stayed behind because one of the other comrades couldn't come out. Luckily, they're both out. So, just really look up, read everything about political prisoners, prisoners of war. And, you know, they know what's happening out here, and I'm sure they're proud, but we have to get them out. We have to get them out. We can't leave anybody behind. So I want to thank you for rocking with me. We went longer today, but, you know, we have the opportunity to do that. I hope everybody enjoyed the discussion. Tomorrow, we're going to have on Mary Hooks, one of the baddest ass organizers I have met in a very long time, down in Atlanta, Georgia, co-director Southerners on a New Ground. Does incredible work, super strategic, and she can also fill us in on what's happening down south, you know, that we don't know and need to keep our eye on. So we thank you for staying with us. You know, stay safe, stay healthy, stay up. We'll see you in the whirlwind. Share this and share the Drew Dixon interview. And we're going to have another sister that unfortunately was assaulted by Russell Simmons, who wants to come on next week and talk to us. So thank you for your comments. We're reading them. And, you know, thank you for rocking with us tonight. And we'll see you in the whirlwind.
They don't want you to know the truth.